Hello everyone, I'm Alex, and today we're going to be ranking the bosses of Resident Evil 6 from worst to best. A lot of people like to say this is the worst one in the mainline series, to the extent that it has practically been canonized as objective fact in the community. However, we at Cytonox both heartily disagree with the public on this assertion. That's not what we're here to talk about today, but you'll probably pick up a few of our thoughts on the subject as a matter of course while we go over the absurd roster of biofreaks littered throughout China or Romania or whatever the hell Balkan state it is Jake starts out in. We did play through it together, I should note, which tends to make these games a lot more bearable than if you go at it solo. As always, we extend our utmost thanks, gratitude, and love to our patrons for their charity. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the ranking.
Number 19, Ogre Man. Ogre Man is like the Fritos of Resident Evil bosses. I'd rather not eat it, but if I have to, I will. While I'd say the normal Ogre Man is pretty alright, what puts him at the bottom is the Ogre Man duo that immediately follows the solo act. Resident Evil 6 also has the strongest boss roster of any RE game by a mile, so even though this is the quote worst boss, it's better than a good deal of other fights in this series. The first Ogre Man at the beginning of Jake's campaign is a fairly interesting chase sequence that quickly devolves into a generic weak point based shoot 'em up. It's not a novel idea, but isn't necessarily bad either. As Alex said in the intro, we went through this game together, and after attempting it alone and then with Alex, I can confirm that trying to do anything without a sentient partner is like trying to win Olympic gold in a 2x200 with a dude with no legs. NPC weapon damage in this game is super unreliable, and it's practically a requirement to have a real-life partner go through it with you to even give yourself a chance to beat anything, or at least progress without wasting your entire inventory. As I said just a moment ago, right after Ogre Man comes the Ogre Man duo, the real manure pile of Resident Evil 6's bosses. A lot of this game's fights can be simplified as generic damage sponges that you shoot until they drop, but the Ogre Man duo differs in that it's an uncontrollable encounter that's only beaten through timed events. Scripted bosses are cool when it's something like a QTE, but when you're sort of just running around trying to solve a puzzle for 10 minutes like a lab rat, it can get pretty fucking irritating. Essentially, the Ogre Men and are harassing a bunch of the Wagner dudes you're with, and you need to stop them. Overall, this thing isn't even an annoying gimmick, it just takes so damn long. To give a little praise, I like that you use the turrets to set up the QTEs to finish the Ogre Men. It at least kept me awake. The map is layered and utilized well, the Ogre Men have cool moments here and there, but the two giants are just plain boring, and are pretty much the only boss in this game that's even remotely mediocre.
Number 18, Lepotitsa. I really sympathize with Leon here. As someone who has also had to suffer being stuck in church with a fat guy who won't stop gassing you, I can tell you all, it does indeed suck. At least in my case, it only took one shotgun blast to the head to make him cut it out though. Lepotitsa takes a veritable armory's worth of sniper rifle rounds and such to cut down. You are ostensibly supposed to lend a helping hand to the survivors taking refuge in the church, but you'll quickly realize that A, it's pretty much impossible, and B, you get pretty much nothing for doing so. It's like being in a room with 12 babies who are all crawling in different directions towards a respective nail bomb. You maybe could save a few, but, well, you're probably just better off leaving a room with 12 nail bombs as soon as possible. While fighting Lepotitsa, you'll notice that your screen will sometimes turn a dark turquoise color. This is a signifier that if you don't haul ass to the other corner of the room, you're gonna choke to death on his gamer musk, and unfortunately this is about as engaging as the fight ever gets. You barely have to care about dodging anything else he does, because he tends to waste time killing random unarmed bozos instead of targeting the two people with military equipment. It's fun enough to hit that base level of boss fight competency that accompanies any encounter where you shoot something tanky that isn't particularly annoying, but not even dedicated RE6 apologists like Jack and myself could spin doctor this into something fantastical.
Number 17, Burzak. I was listening to Joe Rogan and a guest said that cave diving was like the most dangerous hobby there is. For Leon, of course, it's just part of the job, and luckily he has the lung capacity of 4 Michael Phelps and the swimming speed of an orca. Burzak was a interesting addition to Leon's campaign, but as I've said in previous videos, I'd rather have a random insert like this than nothing. Also, I shouldn't act like I've never seen an oversized, mutated shark in a Resident Evil game before. The entire fight is a QTE, but I really like those, doubly so in this game because of the collective satisfaction of completing a sequence with your friend. Burzak's biggest downfall is that he's a QTE where the only visually distinct thing is the button prompt. This whole fight is like watching a movie you really like, but the TV you're watching it on is caked in mud. It's creative from what I could garner, but the highlight is, as with most bosses in this game, the finisher.
Number 16, Ubistvo. Try not to pass out from shock, but there's an ugly chainsaw boss in this game. He's honestly the best of the bunch if we're comparing him to RE4 and 5's contributions to this hyper-specific niche, but that quality bar is around knee height on Salazar, so that's not saying much. The main thing to note about Ubistvo, besides how many points his name would get you in a game of Scrabble, is that he fights you not once, but 4 times. This is somehow not even close to the record holder for most boss rematches in RE6 thanks to a certain Jake-hating someone, but Ubistvo is certainly more persistent than most. Each time the solution is more or less the same, given he fights identically in every encounter, but they make sure to spice it up a little bit with different scenarios. Fighting him on a boat, having to snipe him as Ada, and stuff like that keep him one tier above the bullet sponge fodder like Lepetitsa, even if it's not enough to beat out much of the remaining roster.
Number 15, Ustanok, Final. The infamous bad boy of Resident Evil 6 has finally shown up on this list for the first of many appearances, but unfortunately Muller v Ustanok 6 was a stinker. Ustanok is a strong villain, and his fights, of which there are many, make him the most fun tyrant in the series alongside RE3 Remake Nemesis. But this does not live up to his standard. Ustanok showing up again, this time near lifeless with half a body, left me with a feeling of complete dissatisfaction. I won't spoil much, but the preceding fight was a great ending to him, and this was simply a pointless addendum that ruined what came before. That, and the entire quick time is just pressing R2 to crawl a little bit. The scenario itself is uninteresting, and the setting is, well, I don't even know what it is. An underground lava cart tube system, you know, like the one off I-81 you can visit on weekends. If there's one thing I would do if I became president, I add a whole lot more of these lava cart tube things, because whether or not you realize it yet, we will need them very soon. Anyways, this is a unique concept, I guess, but it wasn't executed very well.
Number 14, Illusja. Illusja is an invisible snake who mostly serves as a vessel of death for the forgettable NPCs making up Chris's 9 millionth doomed squad of the series. Poor Piers had been a victim of Chris's alcoholic menstrual tantrums for the past hour or so of gameplay, which, at least for him, probably made this a welcome break in conversation. Unlike a lot of the lower entries on this list, which are at their base level just slowly staggering bullet sponges, Illusja stands out for moving extremely quickly and erratically. Instead of getting locked in a cycle of shooting, running away, etc., here you're, well, kinda still doing that, but it feels different. There are some unique segments, like when you get caught in the vents, that stand out, and his death comes from a set piece rather than a bullet, which makes it feel more significant than the typical chainsaw-toting goon. I'm not entirely convinced that an electric cable is more powerful than grenades and whatnot, but in a world where every single square inch of land has a corresponding secret lab beneath it, it's probably not worth getting too finicky over the small stuff. We've come a long way from Yon, that's for sure.
Number 13, Ubistvo, Train. In Ubistvo's subsequent Ada-only appearance, you fight him with a train, kind of. RE6 took a lot of creative leisure with the major enemy encounters, which for us is a big reason why we rate them so highly. A ton of these fights take place over multiple 1 to 2 minute sequences that are each uniquely designed in setting and gameplay but blend together wonderfully, and this is a great example. Part 1 of Ubistvo is a pretty cool Hong Kong rooftop escape as he slashes down the scaffolding with his built-in chainsaw. How awesome would that be if you broke out of your skin mold and turned into a chainsaw? Next up, you St. Valentine's Day massacre the thing for like 8 seconds and escape it again. But unsurprisingly, the relentless mutation thing follows you onto a train and you fight it again. This part was kind of frustrating because it can kill you on touch and the arena you fight on is extremely small, and also the two of us kept fucking up, so we ended up dragging out what should have lasted maybe a minute into a 4-minute duel of the fates. Ubistvo was cool, but I do wish the finisher was better. How am I supposed to believe it's dead? It just got railed with like a bazooka and a billion rounds, but can't take a train going the highway speed limit?
Number 12, Mutated Deborah. Now, it's easy for me to say as someone who's never had a sibling mutate into a murderous monstrosity, but I don't think it would really be that hard for me to swallow my apprehension and put it down. This is something that drives me nuts about zombie apocalypse stuff. Like, dude, that guy is definitely infected, just take him out back and, I think my brother and I have a mutual understanding that if one of us develops late-stage necrosis and becomes a raging cannibal mutant, it's probably too late for diplomacy and better to just put things to rest with the old buckshot mouthwash. Unfortunately for Leon, Ada, and the anonymous hunk clone that follows Ada everywhere, Helena can't quite put down old Yeller like she ought to. Instead, she tries her hand at a handful of generic appeals like, "This isn't you!" Like, really? Shucks, and here I thought she always walked around naked and covered in mucus. They're sent in a nice, long Donkey Kong Country minecart ride from hell where the only way forward is through, and by through I mean shooting a lot. Whenever you're not in the cart, it's some typical boots-on-the-ground Resident Evil combat where you run away from tentacles and shoot not eyeballs. Never thought I'd see the day. In what is perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime experience, the weak point of a Resident Evil boss is something other than an eyeball. Rather, it is the flamboyant orange growths on the tentacles that you've got to blast. Color me impressed. Props to Deborah for mutating into a marginally less generic boss fight than most. It takes bravery to break the mold like that.
Number 11. Simmons. Mutt. Alex is more of a fan of Simmons than I am, but I still do think his fights are decent. The highlight of what we called his Mutt phase for me was the intro where his skin goes full thing. I always thought that looked cool in YouTube thumbnails even before I knew what it was. Leon's had experience running from big blobs of 93% lean ground beef on L trains before, and the beginning is just that. Eventually, you leap off the train and Simmons follows you momentarily, which leads to a back and forth game of, like, gun battleship. Your turn, my turn. Your turn, my turn. His design is funny though. I like how his face is still there, but it's like a dick tip to the lion's body because it's still the same size as his human head. After the train, Simmons will disappear for a while, and only return at the end of Leon's campaign after Leon successfully manages to be a key part of an entire city burning to the fucking ground for the second time in his short professional career. This reappearance of the dog, man, is a lot more orthodox, a bullet sponge with a UFC QTE prompt when he momentarily reverts to human form. Oh, and you're fighting on a glass bridge 10,000 feet in the sky to make for good cinematography and TikTok edits. I think this phase lasted longer than it should have, but the Bat Ada ending was pretty cool, and I think the blood umbrella that Simmons makes when he dies should have happened here. In my opinion, it would have been more fitting, but I fuck with this boss regardless.
Number 10. Simmons parentheses bug. Resident Evil 6 is host to some of the most comically resilient creatures in the series, Simmons not least among them by any means. From a dog, to a T-Rex, to a dog again and then a bug, Simmons has practically run the full Animal Kingdom taxonomy gauntlet by the time he confronts you for the last time at the very end of Leon's route. Unfortunately for him, his horrific mutations mark a minor inconvenience in his quest to woo Ada Wong, meaning the only way he'll ever win her hand in marriage is by beating Leon to death with zombies, probably. He does maintain some semblance of his human form at least, although his face looks like a Funtime animatronic, which costs him at least 2 points out of 10. Simmons is primarily focused on impaling zombies and making them internally combust into flames as if they were attacked by Speed King from JoJo Part 8 for reasons beyond my understanding. This is a man who kidnapped thousands of women to surgically craft an Ada Wong clone though, so unless you're the crazy guy from Tusk, I'm willing to bet he doesn't make a lot of sense to you either. Simmons has another key disadvantage, being his inability to recognize when one of the zombies in question has been impaled by a 15-foot-long lightning rod. Given the battle takes place during a thunderstorm, this could be considered a strategic misstep. Never one to say no to a good meal, Simmons will pig out on whatever you put on his plate, whether it carries the risk of electrocuting him to death or not. Do this enough and the bug zappers will hold him at bay, granting you access to the helicopter. Except not really, because everyone knows you need a rocket launcher to get anything done in one of these damn games. Oh hey, I think I know what that is. Bye bye! Bye! Simmons plummets down like 9 zillion stories until he perfectly lands on a sharp obelisk thing, a Dude Perfect-esque stunt that may very well be the most impressive thing he ever accomplished. Maybe Ada would have married him if he tried killing himself in a cool way before resorting to turning people into bugs.
Number 9. Ustanok, Rumble in the Jungle. This boss is a tale of two perspectives, because for me, this was fucking sick. For Alex, he may as well have bought a pay-per-view for a drunken bar fight. The whole beginning cutscene is basically an Avengers movie when not the main hero but like Hawkeye or someone gets a 1v1 against the villain, but the 1v1 where he got clapped already happened, so he does some cool shit and comes out on top. If I could pull off a stunt like this in real life, I'd hire some dude to be a personal Wile E. Coyote and drop things from the sky so I could dodge them by the tips of my pubic hair. I'll keep anyone interested posted. The majority of our so-called Rumble in the Jungle actually does a really good job of integrating both Sherry and Jake throughout the arena, sort of like Wesker from the end of RE5 when you need your partner to move an object to progress. Up until the actual main event, it's like every other boss in that it's a large enemy you shoot a ton until it eventually initiates a cutscene. I do think environmentally, this is one of the better fights in the game. Kudos to Capcom because I doubt I would ever be given the prompt zombie game, big zombie, fight, and come back with giant volcano layer with disconnected metal walkways that don't have rails. Alright, so eventually you make it to the fight, but not before ripping off his arm. Once again, the free will given to the developers with the bosses proved to be a very wise decision on Capcom's behalf. It begins with Ustanok launching Sherry nearly into the lava but successfully melting her gun in the process, while doing the same to Jake, but instead of keeping his gun, kicking it into the lava to set up a true man vs man battle to the death. It's fun, but nothing insane, and the gameplay is pretty self-explanatory. Trying to describe this sequence with words is pointless in my opinion, so to surmise, it's just another incredibly badass fight with minimal flaws and an exceptional finisher.
Number 8. House Chase. House is named after the Serbian word for chaos, which is weird because it was made by an American in a military base under Chinese waters. Maybe it was made with Serbian DNA or something. I must have heard some loose change jingling around in Chris or Pier's pockets because it completely flaunts its supposed objective of infecting the world with C-virus gas to chase our heroes around until death does it part. Things kick off with a scripted climb that reminds me of this one unfair bullshit minigame from Mario Party 10, except better because it doesn't take place inside Mario Party 10. The encounter largely consists of running away and enjoying the hilarity of failing unfairly fast QuickTime events with a friend. Joke as I do, however, I should say that spectacle-wise, this segment genuinely is pretty cool, so don't get things twisted. More entertaining than like half the bosses in the game, which isn't bad for an encounter nearly devoid of combat.
Number 7. Carla. So, we're making this video about 6 months after we played this game, and as I read over the script doc, I saw Carla and thought, well, who the fuck is Carla? And then realized, oh, she's the evil clone of Ada that Simmons made because normal Ada didn't want to fuck him. You can't tell me it isn't creative. Of the two giant melting face on a wall bosses in the Resident Evil series, Carla is far superior and also super hot. How do you fuck up making a virus so bad that the subject can turn into a boat? I honestly feel like Evelyn diminishes how fucking weird this is, but I do think the concept itself is cool. Carla will jump you throughout the boat and almost always conveniently with a liquid nitrogen canister right next to her. Shoot it, she freezes up, onwards. It's a simple but effective approach that climaxes with a weak point shooting gallery and more liquid freeze. Now I understand Dr. Pimple Popper, but she's still blocked on Instagram. I do not want to see that shit. I can confidently say that blasting a hole through a giant face sponge to then blow it into frozen chunks is a very easy way to make an engaging boss.
Number 6. Ustanok. Ustanok makes the Terminator look like a quitter. When he confronts Jake for the 4th time and Leon for the first, they naively theorize that the 4 of them combined can take him down for good. Fat chance. This guy survived a drill to the torso, a plane crash, enough bullets to cover the Earth's surface 3 times over and eats grenades like bonbons. As expected, he effortlessly tanks getting plowed by a truck and 80% of a firing squad like it's a Nerf battle. It's the usual shoot 'em till it's done stuff, but the arena is rather large scale and the guy who gets to drive the truck gets an extra dose of fun if it's their first time. I've hit plenty of people with my Mazda CX-5 over the years, so I'm a little calloused at this point, but I can still remember the days back when driving on the sidewalk still freaked me out a bit. Boy, were those the days.
Number 5. Ustanok Escape. A 30-second chase sequence at number 5? No, we're also including the boss fight that occurs right after the escape, which together make for one of the coolest villain introductions I've seen in my days of gaming. The escape does a really good job of mixing up camera angles and using the broken down buildings as set pieces to enhance the intensity of the chase. Seeing everything Ustanok does just leaves you increasingly intimidated, and starting off a major villain with a chase was probably the best choice they could have made with regards to enhancing his aura. The fight itself isn't anything too special, but is most notable because of the arena. The arena has a built-in path marked by oil canisters you can bait Ustanok into running near. It's like a small puzzle and each barrel is a piece of it. There was something so cool about really zoning in on the environment and fully utilizing it to your advantage that leaves Ustanok's first attempt at Jake and Sherry as one of our favorite fights in Resident Evil 6.
Number 4. Simmons T-Rex. I wonder what determines what you mutate into from a Resident Evil virus. There seems to be a 99% chance you become a zombie, 0.75% chance you become giant and grow eyeballs, and a 0.25% chance that you become some sort of indestructible super freak. Simmons hit the jackpot and scored the last one with the ability to morph into different creatures packed in with it like an evil Ben 10 watch. Then again, it might just be an effect of the C virus, which to be fair is pretty much the highest quality virus a guy can get. No surprise considering all the money that got pumped into that project thanks to Simmons being a part of the billionaire pedophile elite club. Maybe it's time I start saving my money for a virus of my own instead of spending it all on prostitutes, steel reserve, and mobile game currency. This fight rules, not only because it's got a lot of explosions and Gatling guns, but because it packs in a little satisfying fist action as well. Pretty rare you get both in one bout, so treasure it. Punching the soul out of Simmons totally rules, and if you don't like it, you probably like stuff like putting tons of penises in your ass. Shoot him enough and your bullets will cut through his flesh like a bullet through flesh. In an ideal world, at least. This is Resident Evil, so he's attacking you again within 20 seconds of the fight ending, though. Fancy that.
Number 3. Ustanok Drill. 1 Ustanok, 2 Ustanok, red Ustanok, blue Ustanok. Usually when something shows up more than 5 times in a game as 5 separate bosses, it gets tiresome, irritating, monotonous, whatever you may. But if only once again a point to the quality of the fights of this game, Ustanok's 5th of 6 individual fights is an absolute fucking killer. Like the escape one, while we labeled this under the elaborately titled umbrella of drill, we're actually counting the drill plus the entire stealth level before it. So, Ustanok is a cool motherfucker and that's been established. Also, he's blind. Tip to any story writers, if you want to make a character triple cool, just remove a sense. Anyways, onto the fight. The highlight of the stealth parts isn't that they're intense and difficult and scary, but instead creative and thoughtful. The first one is the most basic. You hide in dumpsters from Ustanok and his drones on a fairly linear path. You can actually kill the bugs, which puts you with a choice of hurrying the process, but potentially getting caught if you don't calculate the distance the drones cover, or you can play it safe and kill them after waiting. The next part is much less linear than the first and really forces teamwork, which we both enjoyed. Alex and I split up and killed the drones to cover each other in a random and scattered order because the arena is so complexly built, almost maze-like, but not getting caught is pretty hard. If you do, you can actually hide in the dumpsters and it works, and it was pretty tense waiting to see if it worked or not. The final section is the most confusing by a good margin, but figuring it out was rewardingly satisfying. To escape, you need a key which Ustanok is standing on. To get him off, one of you needs to use remote explosives to bait him away while the other runs in to grab the key. While one grabs it, the other needs to place a second explosive, blow it up with enough time for themselves to escape, their partner with the key to escape, and then also leave enough space so you can sprint to the door and leave Ustanok without catching up. The build up to the ending was also so cool, with Ustanok slowly closing in on you as you move room by room to no avail. When you do eventually make it to the drill, it's exactly as you'd expect. You ram him against a wall with a fucking drill. There's no bullshit about it, it's just awesome, and this is simply a fun boss that genuinely makes you think, a rarity in gaming.
Number 2. Ustanok in the helicopter. Ustanok can box, pilot aircraft, operate advanced military machinery. What can't this guy do? Someone should have him go negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza. Unfortunately for Jake and Sherry, the only thing on his mind here is murder, so they have to fight fire with fire as best they can. Which is a tall order given what you should already know about the durability of this guy based on him appearing on the list 6 times already. Ineffective as their efforts may be, however, it's at the very least still fun as hell. The set pieces in this game are absolutely insane, and anybody without skills on par with Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible would die within 30 seconds of roaming around in the world of Resident Evil 6. You walk 5 paces outside your house and you're cooked if you can't backflip 10 feet high to dodge the speeding 18-wheeler with a nuclear bomb inside headed directly for you. I think I could hack it in there, but those of you who might not be up to snuff can at least live out that fantasy in this fight, which has you jumping between helicopters and fending off buff cyborg Hannibal Lecter. If you weren't sold on Jake's campaign being the best one yet, well, here you go. It also ends with him driving a motorcycle into the desert by himself with sunglasses on for literally no reason after a full game of bonding with a girl who seems to be totally in love with him. That's how you know it's made by Capcom, alright. Just shoot shit and have fun, and make sure not to miss the QTE at the end. Or do, it's kinda hilarious seeing QTE fails in this game, knock yourself out.
Number 1. House. I'm not sure what House is, but he looks cool, man. Directly following the chase boss, Chris Redfield's campaign ends in typical Chris fashion with him getting to watch one of his squad mates get absolutely posterized by some giant biofuck. Really, Alex should be the spokesperson for this boss because the core component that makes House so good is Piers. He turns into a fucking god during this fight, and from the outside, it looks like a joy to play as. House has a mix of all things good when it comes to a Resident Evil boss, meaning theme, visuals, audio, environmental traps, intuitive and player-benefiting arena design, fight evolution, and major story implications. It's a pretty simple concept, but smoking a giant translucent water skull blob in its organs and then killing it with electricity just kicks butt. The ending was really good as well, and was probably the only time in recent game memory where I really got invested into a character dying. Piers was an amazing sidekick and deserves more recognition. Big up Capcom for making House so fun by constantly changing the dynamics of the fight throughout, and while it isn't a shoo-in for number 1, it's incontestably among the elites of the game, any of whom could have fallen into this spot.
Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe and watch our other videos while you're at it. Join our Discord, join our Patreon, everything. We love you if you watch this far. That's all for now. Deuces.